The ute segment is huge, and this test is going to be big too. We've got the 6 most popular double cab pickup trucks in Australia right now, and the aim of this comparison test is to help you find which is the best dual cab for you.
They're all diesels, they're all autos, and they're all sorted out for work and play, but this time around we're focusing more on the play side of things. So, no towing, no load lugging in the tray, and no pouring over the interior. For all those details and more, read our reviews on carsguide.com.au.
Yep, this test will be pretty simple. I'll take care of the on-road side of things and Crafty will do the off-road stuff. But first, let us introduce you to our contenders.
It wouldn't be a dual cab ute test without our carryover champion, the Ford Ranger. This one is the XLT with the 2-litre engine. And there are some familiar faces from our recent test as well. The Mitsubishi Triton GLS Premium and the Toyota HiLux SR5 are here to try and topple the Ford. You can watch our previous video to see how that panned out. These 3 will also have to get to grips with the likes of the range-topping Isuzu D-Max LST, as well as a flagship Holden Colorado Z71 and the newly added top of the pops Nissan Navara N-Trek. This is going to be good.
I can see the comments already. No, Amarok, where's the BT50? Where's the X-Class V6? Well, these are the 6 utes that Aussies are buying most. So that's why they're here. Now, let's get on with it, shall we? There's a bit to get through here. These utes represent different points in their respective ranges, so it's not as straightforward as having the top spec versus the top spec. We wanted a reasonably even playing field when it came to pricing too. Here are the list prices for each of these utes before on-road costs and options at the time of test. Head to Auto Trader to see if you can find a better deal and read the full written review at the CarsGuide site for a comprehensive breakdown on equipment levels across each of these models. The engines fitted to these 6 utes all have some common elements. They're all 4-cylinder turbo diesels. The Ford and Nissan have twin turbos, while the rest are single turbos. And all of them have automatic transmissions fitted as tested, as well as 4-wheel drive with a low-range transfer case. We'll get to the off-road stuff later, but we'll give you a sec to read through these details. For this test, we took all 6 of these utes out for an urban driving loop, including roundabouts and speed humps, before hitting the open road and the country to see how they stacked up. It wasn't just me testing all 6 of these vehicles though. We had a full crew on site trying to figure out which is the best up front and which is the best in the back. And here's what we found. Starting at the bottom, the D-Max was the gruffest of the lot, with the most truck-like experience. Its engine was lazy and noisy, and outside of the sweet spot between 50 and 80 k's an hour, the transmission was overly busy, while at lower speeds it had pronounced turbo lag too. Its steering was heavy and dull, the ride was choppy at low speeds and also unsettled at higher pace. We really struggled to find much to like about the D-Max. The HiLux suffers some issues too. The ride is fierce enough to make one of our backseat testers feel car sick. It bucks over sharp edges, fumbles over lumpy country roads, and never feels settled even over smooth surfaces. Its engine also felt a bit lethargic, and the 6-speed auto wasn't quite as clever or composed as the others. A plus for the HiLux was its steering, which offered precise feel and good feedback, and it was one of the quieter utes too. Fourth best was the Triton, which was the quietest of our 6 utes, and that helped it feel quite good on the road. Its engine offered decent pulling power, the transmission was well sorted, and its steering was accurate and easy to judge, despite being a little bit fidgety. The suspension though was sharper, and there was more dip and dive over bigger bumps and under braking. Next best was the Colorado, which has benefited from the Holden mentality around suspension tuning. It felt tight and controlled at lower speeds with the best low-speed ride in general. Its steering was well sorted too, and the engine, with second most power and equal most torque, was good if a bit gruff. The transmission was hard to catch out, and it did a good job at high speeds and around town. But the brake feel was wooden, with no real feel or progression to the pedal. Its engine braking on descents even blipped the throttle, but it didn't cover up the fact that the actual braking was substandard. The Nissan Navara N-Trek was a bit of a surprise. Its ride was really well sorted, no doubt down to the retuned rear suspension of the Series 4 Navara. It dealt really well with bumpy sections of road. It also sat surprisingly flat through corners, making for more comfortable progress for the driver and the passengers. There are still issues with the twin-turbo engine being a bit noisy at lower speeds, the auto being a bit busy, and the steering still takes quite a bit of effort because it has a slower rack with heavier weighting. But overall, the Navara was judged second best of this bunch. The winner for our on-road part of this test is the Ford Ranger XLT. Now, this isn't just the regular XLT, it's the one with the 2-litre bi-turbo engine. And that's part of the reason that it won this part of the test, because this is a terrific engine, and with a 10-speed automatic, it just makes the best use of its power of these 6 utes. It's got plenty of power, plenty of torque, and the 10-speed automatic is really thoughtful in the way that it shifts gears. It isn't too fussy, it doesn't make too many changes, and it'll hold gears when it thinks it needs to. And it's that logic that makes driving the Ranger really enjoyable. That's just part of it though. There's also the steering, which is easily the best of these 6 utes. It's light, it's accurate, it's easy to turn, and it means that after a hard day on the tools, you won't be battling the steering wheel on your way home. And then there's the ride comfort, which is also excellent. Sure, it might be a little bit firmer than, say, the Navara, but it does feel really well composed, and the way that it controls its weight over bumpy sections of road is what impressed us most. Then there's the braking performance. The brake pedal feel is really positive underfoot, and that means that you feel like you've got confidence in the vehicle, and that's despite the fact that this is a big, heavy, dual cab 4-wheel drive ute. It's really impressive. Plus, it's the most refined of these 6 utes. It has the quietest engine, there's just a little bit of road noise to contend with and some wind noise from the mirrors, but otherwise, it's like an SUV in here, and that was the comment from people up front and those in the back. But there is a downside to the Ranger, and that's that it's expensive. It is the most expensive of these 6 utes, and although you do feel like you're paying for better engineering and a better put together vehicle and a better drive experience overall, you do miss out on some of the creature comforts that you might like. There's no electric seat adjustment for the driver, there's no seat heating, there's no surround view camera. All of those things might factor into your decision, but it does feel to us like this is still the best of these 6 utes when it comes to on-road driving. Over this on-road part of our test, we kept a tally of the fuel use of each of these utes. Here you'll see the official combined fuel consumption figure for each vehicle. Now that's what the manufacturer claims each ute should use. And here you'll see what we actually saw on test. We'll give it a sec just to let it all sink in.
They're all decent off-roaders in their own right, so we took them on a mix of terrain to give us a clear indication of how well they'd go in the rough stuff. Our drive loop includes gravel, deep ruts, mud holes, rocky climbs and more. Every ute here is a 4-wheel drive with the low-range transfer case. The Colorado Z71 has a limited slip diff, and the rest have diff locks, except the D-Max. We avoided using the diff locks in order to keep the playing field as level as possible. They all seem reasonably close to each other in terms of off-road capability, well on paper at least, but as is often the case, the real world can shake up expectations. For full-blown specs and details, read our review. Before I start ute bashing, it has to be noted that as tested, all of these vehicles were on standard road bias tyres and standard suspension, a less than ideal combination on tough terrain. There's a lot to like about the D-Max's simplicity, but it worked the hardest of this lineup on what I reckon were easy to moderate hill climbs and downhills. Its steering was heavy, the engine was noisy, it sometimes scrambled for traction on uphills and lacked controlled momentum on the downhills. On the plus side, its suspension was pretty good, soaking up serious potholes and wheel ruts, even at low speeds. Next up was the Colorado, which did our set-piece rocky runs a lot easier than the D-Max. We spun tyres a bit at the top of one climb, but overall the Z71's engine and electronics were better than the D-Max's. Steering was also a big improvement over the D-Max's with a more direct feel to it. On our first downhill run we had some issues with hill descent control. It just wouldn't engage, but it was much more effective the second time around, holding our speed at around 3 km/h on a short steep section. The Z71 suspension didn't soak up bumps as well as some of the others in this mob, really thumping in and out of wheel ruts and potholes. I'm a big fan of Mitsubishi's Super Select 2 4x4 system, and it didn't disappoint, being so easy to operate and so reliable. Even when driven on the wrong line up and down this rocky and rutted hill, the Triton managed to tackle everything with minimal fuss. All round it's pretty dialed in, but it had to work a fraction harder, only a fraction, than some of the others here, and it just didn't feel as composed as the Ranger or Navara, or as capable as the HiLux. The Navara was solid and reliable without ever being truly special. It did the climbs and downhills well with controlled, sustained momentum, and its suspension was pretty impressive at low and high speeds. In terms of steering, it never felt as lively as the Ranger, but it's not as ponderously heavy as the D-Max. Yep, it's a bit noisy, that twin-turbo engine and cooling fan are on the wrong side of raucous at low speeds, and sure, you had to work a bit harder to steer it, but it's certainly capable. The Ranger had the most quietly efficient off-road setup of this bunch. Its combination of driver assist tech and mechanicals was never intrusive and always highly effective. It tackled everything with regulated and sustained speed, and it also had the best steering, consistently well weighted, even at low speeds. But while it had a lot of positives going for it, including very supple suspension, the Ranger often feels 1 or 2 steps removed from the actual driving experience, and it wasn't the most capable four-wheel drive here. It's never been the most refined ute around, but the HiLux makes up for that by being an all-round reliable and capable ute. And while it doesn't have the highest torque figure here, the Ranger and Z71 both have more, the HiLux feels like it always gets every bit of its torque to the dirt at the right time. There are serious issues around Toyota's diesel particulate filter, read CarsGuide.com.au for more on those, and the HiLux's suspension yielded a very harsh ride, but with bush-ready low-range gearing, a tractable turbo diesel engine and a brutally effective four-wheel drive setup, this ute once again proved its superiority off-road. It may not be the most comfortable thing around, we're just clambering through some deep wheel ruts up this rocky hill climb, but it is the most reliable and it's definitely the most capable, and it does it with no fuss. You can be assured as you do any low speed four-wheel driving, you can rely on the HiLux. It really is that good.
After days of testing and hours spent trying to figure out our winner overall for this test, well, we do have winners in each of the individual elements. Crafty, off-road, there was a clear victor.
Mate, absolutely. Head and shoulders for me above the rest was the HiLux. I mean, it's capable, very capable. Sometimes not so comfortable when you're thumping into those wheel ruts, but you can just rely on it. You can get through pretty much anything, whereas some of these others stumbled a bit.
Yeah, and on-road, the Ranger was our pick, not just for the driver, but for passengers in the front and in the back. And every one of our testers on this comprehensive test found it to be the most enjoyable to drive and the most comfortable. But overall, you might be wondering which one of these 6 utes was our winner. And here's that information. You might be surprised to see the Triton come second overall and the HiLux down in 5th, but these are the rankings across our comparison review criteria, which you can read in full detail at the CarsGuide site.
Now that's a fair bit of stuff for you to get your head around, so we'll give you a moment or two, but in the meantime, if you want to have a crack at us, get stuck into us in the comments section below.
Before you do though, make sure you go to the CarsGuide site and read the full detailed review so you can have the best information before you get stuck into crafty. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification icon so you can stay up to date with all our latest videos.